It looks simple, slow, and even a little strange. Yet this little car became one of the most famous in the world, loved by millions, mocked by many, but impossible to ignore. Today, we uncover the shocking secrets behind the Citroën 2CV. During the 1930s, Citroën engineers began quietly working on a revolutionary new project. Their goal was simple but ambitious: to design a car that could provide affordable transportation for rural families. The prototypes of this new vehicle, later known as the 2CV, were already taking shape by the time Europe plunged into World War II. When Nazi Germany invaded and occupied France in 1940, these prototypes suddenly became a dangerous liability. Adolf Hitler's regime had its own people's car, the Volkswagen Beetle, and there was a genuine fear that the 2CV could be seized, copied, or even rebranded for the German war effort. Pierre-Jules Boulanger, the head of Citroën at the time, refused to let that happen. He ordered the prototypes hidden in barns, warehouses, and remote countryside workshops. Some were dismantled and disguised as farm equipment, others were tucked away under tarps and haystacks. For the entire duration of the war, these cars stayed out of sight, preserved in secrecy. When France was liberated in 1944, the hidden vehicles were brought back into the light. They became the foundation of the production 2CV. Not just a people's car, but a symbol of survival, resilience, and quiet defiance. The Citroën 2CV was never intended to be flashy or luxurious. It was created to solve a very practical problem faced by rural France in the 1930s and 40s. Many farmers could not afford a motor vehicle, and those who could often found existing cars too heavy, too expensive, or completely unsuitable for country roads. So, Citroën gave its engineers an unusual challenge: design a car that could carry 4 adults, plus 50 kilograms of farm produce, across a freshly plowed field, and do it without breaking a basket of eggs placed inside the car. This became the famous egg test, and it guided the entire design philosophy of the 2CV. To meet this demand, engineers developed one of the softest suspension systems ever seen. The car seemed to float over bumps and ruts, swaying dramatically but protecting its fragile cargo. Farmers loved it because it could handle muddy tracks, rough paths, and uneven fields that would stop heavier vehicles. The egg test wasn't just a quirky story, it was proof of a design built around real people, real farms, and real needs. In 1960, Citroën introduced one of the most unusual production cars ever built, the 2CV Sahara. Unlike the standard 2CV, which used a small 2-cylinder engine at the front, the Sahara was fitted with 2 separate engines, one in the front and another in the rear. Each engine powered its own set of wheels, giving the car a form of 4-wheel drive. This design was not meant for speed or luxury, but for practicality. In extreme conditions, the Sahara was built for use in remote regions such as Africa, mountainous terrain, and rural areas with poor roads. Each engine had its own ignition, fuel system, and gearbox. The driver could run both engines together for maximum traction, or just one to save fuel. Only around 700 Saharas were ever produced, making them extremely rare today. Their unique dual-engine design remains one of the most fascinating and inventive solutions in automotive history. One of the most distinctive features of the Citroën 2CV was its unusual suspension system, which gave the car a reputation for comfort and flexibility far beyond its tiny size. Instead of relying on conventional coil springs or leaf springs, the 2CV used a system of long horizontal coil springs housed in metal cylinders mounted between the wheels on each side of the car. These springs were linked to the wheels through levers and connecting rods, allowing movement at one wheel to be partially absorbed and balanced by the opposite wheel. The effect was remarkable. The 2CV could travel over deeply rutted farm tracks, cobblestones, or even freshly plowed fields with minimal discomfort to its passengers. The car leaned dramatically in corners, rocking back and forth almost like an umbrella in the wind, which gave this suspension its famous nickname. While it looked unusual, it delivered exactly what Citroën engineers intended: extraordinary comfort and stability on rough rural roads. This system was cheap, simple to maintain, and uniquely effective, making it one of the defining technical achievements of the 2CV and a major reason for its legendary practicality. When the Citroën 2CV first appeared in 1948, simplicity was the guiding principle. That philosophy extended all the way to the way the car was started. Unlike most modern cars that rely on an electric starter motor, the early 2CVs used something far more traditional, a hand crank. To bring the little two-cylinder engine to life, the driver had to insert a crank handle through an opening at the front bumper, then give it a firm twist to spin the engine. It was a method more commonly associated with tractors and pre-war cars than with a modern post-war family vehicle. Yet, for Citroën, it made perfect sense. A crank starter was cheap, reliable, and could work even if the car's battery was completely flat. Even after electric starters were added in the 1950s, Citroën kept the hand crank as a backup feature. Among the many unusual features of the early Citroën 2CV, perhaps the most amusing was its windscreen wiper system. Unlike most cars, which relied on a dedicated electric motor, the first generations of the 2CV used a far simpler solution. The wipers were powered directly by the engine's speedometer cable. This meant the wiper's speed was directly linked to how fast the car was traveling. Driving quickly in heavy rain, the wipers swept back and forth at high speed, keeping the view clear. But slowing down at a red light or in traffic, the wipers slowed too, sometimes crawling almost to a stop, right when visibility was most needed. It was a practical compromise in keeping with Citroën's philosophy of cost-cutting and mechanical simplicity. Later models eventually gained an electric motor, but many enthusiasts still remember the original system with a smile. The Citroën 2CV's engine is one of the longest-lasting in car history. Launched in 1948 with just 9 horsepower, this tiny 375 cubic centimeter flat twin grew only slightly over the decades. First to 425 cc, then 435 cc, and finally 602 cc, producing a modest 29 horsepower. What made it remarkable wasn't power, but endurance. The air-cooled design meant no radiator, fewer parts, and almost nothing to go wrong. At just 40 kilos, the engine was so light you could lift it out by hand. Farmers loved it because it was simple, cheap to run, and incredibly tough on rough roads. And here's the shocking part. Citroën kept building this same basic engine until 1990. That's 42 years of production, a lifetime for a car design. Few engines in history have stayed in use so long, unchanged, and so beloved. The 2CV's flat twin wasn't powerful, but it was practically immortal. In the end, the Diane faded away by 1983, while the 2CV survived until 1990. The replacement failed. The legend lived on.